Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the exciting annual Board Policy Review Committee meeting. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today within the SWIA of the Sechelt people who have inhabited and managed these lands for millennia, and that several board members here represent areas within the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. My name is Kate Stanford, and I'm chairing the meeting today, and I'd like to call on Executive Coordinator Armitage to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to guide the committee through the annual review of SCRD board policies. This report also responds to a previous board directive regarding policies requiring major revision. Staff are looking for the committee to review each board policy and provide suggestion per staff's recommendations in the chart on page 3 and 4 of the report. All board policies are provided in attachment A for the committee's review. And staff note there are 7 additional board policies that were provided in attachment B that were previously misclassified as operational policies. So these policies will need to be reviewed and classified as outlined on page 5 of the review. Happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly go back and adopt the agenda. Is there any additions or changes? Seeing none. Oh, well, I was going to do it by consent. Okay. We have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. And also, I'd like a motion to accept all reports as presented. Got a motion on the table, seconder. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. So in terms of how to go through this, I thought we could just start at the top. And if you have any questions or you have recommendations to change, delete, add, if they could be presented in terms of a motion, I think that would help us with process. So we'll just start at the top with policy and procedure framework. And staff status has it up to date. Is there any questions or comments about this? And I'm just looking at the page number. It's easier to do it this way. So we're on, oh crap. So we've got definitions. So I guess we're starting with attachment A on page 6. And that's mainly different definitions. Any questions about that one? Seeing none, we can just move on. The second one, I don't have pages on this. So I'm just going to have to keep moving forward on that way. Appendix B. So it's a submission deadline is the next one. I'm getting these mixed up because they're set up differently. 12? Okay. They don't match up. So we've got, on page 12, we've got the travel and accident insurance, which is one down. So I'm on the item before that, which is agenda item submission deadline, which I think is page 9. I have a different package.
Chair, may I ask if you downloaded
Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so let's go to Director McMahon.
Yes, I'm wondering if we could skip all the ones that are considered up to date unless the directors flagged anything about those ones during their review of the agenda package.
Director Gabius?
If we're just gonna scroll down from one to the other, I'm not sure how that would speed things up.
They're kind of,
Because they're not in blocks, right? They're not all,
it won't take us too long to just run through them, because I'm already getting mixed up, because I've got different pages anyway, so. So we didn't have any questions or comments about the first two. Now we're on to Director's Travel Accident Insurance, and can somebody just keep giving me the pages, because I'm on a different setup, 13. Okay, Director Bax first.
Yeah, I just, my observation of the agendas that I've been able to get off of the shared portal is that Appendix A on page 9, Appendix B, these are blank documents. Page 9 and 10 on my agenda, they're blank documents, they're placeholders. Okay, and is that part of the?
I'd like to call a recess. Welcome back, everyone. We've got ourselves sorted out. So we are going to start our next item, which is travel accident insurance. Director McMahon, do you have a question?
I'm wondering if we really need further review in order to repeal a one-sentence policy. I just, honestly, I think we can just repeal this thing and move on. Should I make a motion to repeal this policy? Well, I move to repeal the Director's Travel Accident Insurance Policy.
Do I have a seconder? Yes, we have a seconder. Any other comments, questions? Is your question related to this policy? So I'm just going to go to Director Gabius for her comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm just wondering, when a policy is slated to be repealed or suggest that we repeal it, I would like to see the rationale, like why we're repealing it. Just a quick one sentence. I don't know if staff can speak to this particular one.
Staff, would you like to just speak to why this is being repealed, recommended for repealing?
Thank you, Chair. So the reason why it's not 100% recommended for repeal is to ensure that there's a full cross-section of coverage and we're not indirectly omitting some directors. We now offer health benefits, which include some of these coverages for some of the directors, but some of the directors may or may not be participating in those benefits, so we wanted to just ensure that everybody was covered. And so we hadn't had an opportunity to do that, so we wanted to make sure that there was no gaps before it was repealed. Thank you.
Director Bax, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about that, that we have coverage outside of this particular coverage, but this is an additional in-house insurance that's been offered to the, and so I don't see the point in repealing it if we do, if it is something that's already been approved. I think it's something that benefits our survivors and or ourselves should we be injured in the course of our work. So I think I would be opposed to repealing it.
Just a comment from what I understood, Director Bax, is that there is policy that does cover us in other areas. It's just it isn't complete yet. So this being repealed is a possibility at a later date as it's covered in other areas, if that's correct. Director McMahon.
This policy is from 1983. I'm not sure that anybody has been looking at it, but I'm not sure that it's consistent with current practice is probably the issue. I'm wondering, though, if there is another way to skin this cat. Like, could we just pass a motion to have HR review the travel accident insurance coverage for directors, and then we can nuke this policy?
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. If staff would like to respond to that question.
Yeah, it's actually not through, it's through our other types of insurance that this type of coverage is covered. It's not through, there's supplemental. So I would just say that it go back to staff. We don't need to identify the specific division. It would be the suggestion.
Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments on the motion, I would like to have a vote on the motion. All those in favor? That motion fails. Is there any other motions or actions recommended by the board?
I'll take a stab at it. I move that we send this policy to staff for review.
We already did that.
Oh, okay. No, I thought the motion was to repeal it.
It is confusing because it says on the page recommended for repeal, but on the form in the package, it says it's referred to staff for further review to confirm recommendations for repeal.
That sounds like a motion to me.
It's already actioned. So if there's no further comments or questions, I'd like to move on to the next policy, and that's SCRD park naming. And that can be found on page 14 of my package. So the recommendation or the status of this policy is staff recommend combining parks naming and rec facility room naming and propose it be added to the service plan for 2025. Directors, do we have any comments or questions or changes? Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair. As staff is open to suggestions, since this is going to be revised, for parks, would it be possible to have an option for First Nations to give like I see signage, like say Connor Park has First Nations, like a she shall name as well? Is this something that could be included in the policy, that First Nations can, the she shall, the Squamish can suggest a name that could be added to the signage?
Thank you. Yes, I think that is part of this particular policy, but if staff would just like to clarify that. So just confirming that, yes, that process is within this policy. Are you finding it? I'm looking, Director Gabius. It's on page, where did I see it? I've got it on page 14. I did see it. Go ahead.
Chair, I'm not seeing it explicitly identified in the policy.
I may have seen it in a different policy, but I did see that it was a level of how the names are considered, in what order. So I'll keep going through it. So which policy was that? Direct renaming policy. Okay. So there's a renaming policy we'll look at as well. Room naming. So in that case, as this is not explicit in the park naming policy, Director Gabius, would you like to make a motion?
I don't know that a motion is needed at this point. I think the suggestion's been made and it's already in the room naming, so as they combine both, I'm sure it will appear somewhere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Bax?
Yeah, we're going to be including some type of reference to collaborating with the rights and titles of the Sechelt Nation and the Squamish Nation in our in these park naming things. And is that something that should be included in the procedure bylaw? And so staff will have to create. Do we need to create a motion to ask staff to do that?
I'm not seeing anything in the affirmative from staff, so we'll just leave that one it is. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I remember a lengthy discussion on this topic, which I think was about a year ago. And a number of suggestions were made, which I'm sure that staff will incorporate when they are drafting a new policy. One of my suggestions was that no future park or building should be named after any director, living or dead. Thank you.
So I'm seeing no further questions from the board and no requests for further action or recommendations. So I'd like to move on to the next policy, which is reimbursement of directors' travel and other expenses. And the status on this one is up to date. Any questions from the board? Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair. And I wasn't here last year, so that could have been very well part of the conversation. So apologies if I'm doubling. Would it be possible to add to the policies to recognize or incentivize mode shift to include public transit and perhaps things like car share, or I'm not sure if that was discussed last year.
Would you like to make a recommendation for further review in that regard?
If I can just give a suggestion to staff, I don't know if a motion would be needed, or I don't know if the other committee members have any feedback on that.
I'm not seeing any oh, Director McMahon.
I did make a suggestion a few months ago that we track our active travel, just so that we can demonstrate if we are doing mode shift, even if it's not, resulting in an actual payment for an expense. But I personally track all the meetings that I go to, walking or by bike or by transit. And if we have a corporate strategy to mode shift, then we need a method of tracking it. Now, that may not fall ideally within the reimbursement, but on the other hand, that's the form that we fill out every month. And I notice that the form now has 2 boxes that you check whether you're driving a gas vehicle or an EV. So it's just an opportunity to inform ourselves more. And that's not only for directors, but it would be interesting to know how our staff is traveling. My suggestion, but that might best be referred to the sustainability coordinator.
Staff, do you have a response? No?
Yeah, I believe that our staff policy would more align with some of the considerations that the board is looking to incorporate in their own policies. We have a lot more of those factors in our own staff policy. I think this was adopted before we had done some significant revisions to our staff policy, so we can bring that back and reflect some of those considerations at a future committee.
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
So just to give Director Gabius a chance, I think we're talking 2 different things. We're talking about data and records, but we're also, I think Director Gabius was talking about incentivization. So those might be 2 different aspects of it. One informs the other, but I think there's an opportunity here for us to also provide incentivization for board members to participate in more active transportation. So do you have something you can recommend, Director Gabius?
And just, thank you, Chair, and just to clarify, like incentivization might not be the right word, but just to recognize, to say like in our policy, if you take public transit, you will be reimbursed for your travel. I think it's important to put it in there. I guess motion to refer the reimbursement of directors' travel and other expenses policy to staff and have it come back to us at a later date with suggestions? I'm not
In
sure.
regards to active transportation.
Adding, yeah. Alternative transport, modes of transportation or.
Do we have that, Scribe?
Thank you, Chair. I took some notes as the directors were speaking, so it's a combination of both Director McMahon and Director Gabius's recommendation. The Board Policy Review Committee recommends that the reimbursement of directors' travel and other expenses policy be referred to staff to include and perhaps incentivize public transit and car sharing, and that active travel be tracked to demonstrate if directors are practicing more active and alternative modes of transportation.
Does that cover what you were looking for?
And then some, I think, beyond. So I don't know how everybody else, I mean, I don't, like, is this the vehicle for the tracking motion? Is this appropriate?
Through to
Or is
staff.
it beyond the scope of what we're doing?
So it is challenging today as we review the policies. I know our tendency is to want to go in and amend these. So we want to not do that on the fly because it really helps for us to take it away. And as we're sitting here, we are noticing there's some linkages with other perhaps procedures or practices. So from staff's perspective, what we hope for from today is just direction to take back the policy, and we'll review them at a high level. But if you include things in your motion, like the types of things, for example, active transportation, public transit, that would be appropriate. The data tracking, my concern is that might get lost in these meeting minutes. It doesn't, unless it's something that you're suggesting we enshrine in the policy, in my opinion, it might not be the place for that recommendation. Again, though, it's the committee's discretion to provide that direction.
So the motion has not been seconded, so we can adjust quite easily.
Oh, sorry, Director Bax.
If it's okay, I'd like Director Gabius to complete her motion.
Yeah. I would be inclined to not have the tracking part and just keep it simple and to the policy, the reimbursement policy. So just removing the last part, I guess.
Staff?
Perhaps just for comfort, local governments are required through our provincial requirements for reporting. We have to report this type of data regardless. So that's why there already has been some changes to your submission documents. Could we strengthen it? Potentially, but most certainly it's a consideration. So just so you're aware that that's already being done. So the policy changes though make sense. Thank you.
Are you comfortable with the motion? Would you like it read back again?
That the reimbursement of directors' travel and other expenses policy be referred to staff to explore references to more active and alternative modes of transportation.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Any other questions, Director Bax?
At the risk of becoming operational, I noticed that the change in the, that was recognized earlier, that there was another box added to the bottom of our forms. I would think that a third box that included either active transportation or public transit could be checked. And that would be a way to simply gather this data as well. And maybe if it's reworking our expense form a little bit to get what we need within this, this thing, but that's up to staff, I guess.
So we just have it's just a suggestion. I think staff can take that back for what it is. And we have a motion. If there's any other questions, are we ready to vote? All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Okay, our next one is petitions and delegations, and that's on page 19 of my package. And according to the status, that is up to date. Any questions, comments for that policy? Seeing none, we can move on to the next one. And that is use and insurance of rental and personal vehicles. That's on page 21. That is up to date according to the status. Seeing no hands related to that, we'll move on. Development variance permits, that is up to date according to the status. That's on page 23. No comments from the board, so I'll keep moving on. Then we've got committee volunteer meeting expenses on page 24. That has been referred to staff for further review and major revision. Yes. So any comments to that? That is still being worked on. Okay, I'm seeing no questions for clarification from the board, so we'll keep moving on. We've got constituency expenses. And status on that is it is up to date. Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on. The next one is contacting SCRD solicitors. And there's a staff recommendation, or a status on that is staff recommend this policy be identified as hold for repeal while a new policy is developed. Could we just get a few more details on that, please, staff?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there is a policy under development at this time. It's just not ready to come forward for board review, but there is something that we are currently working on in terms of it's an overall arching legal policy, and it will encompass elements of who contacts solicitors and the process for doing that.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there is an ETA on that, because it is something that comes up. So do we have a rough idea when it might be coming forward?
I'm hesitant to commit to a timeline at this moment. We're aiming, I would say, for Q3.
Director Bax.
I wonder if we need a motion to hold this for, no? We don't need a motion?
No, that's part of the status right now. Yeah. Seeing no other hands, we'll move on to the next one, community sewage systems, and that's on page 29. Director McMahon?
I've been concerned for some time that our policies around acquiring new sewage systems are desperately in need of update. And I am concerned that the policies need to be updated before we end up taking on more sewage systems. So I just want to check in with staff about that.
Staff?
I believe that we also have bylaw 320 being also concurrently developed that has a lot of intersects related to this. I think that in the absence of a policy, the board will always come for consideration for some of these things. However, some of our procedures in our development approval processes are not always clear. So because we do have concurrent things like our OCP renewal, our bylaw updates, there's some identification, or there's some identified items within the DAPR program that's also intersecting into this. I think we want to make sure that we're being consistent with all of those. I'm not sure the policy is actually the silver bullet. We're still dealing with some outstanding items. So I think that the delay in the renewal of the policy is because we want to make sure we're in alignment with those types of procedures before we go ahead with the policy. Because I think the OCP, the bylaw 320, which is your subdivision approval process, those need to inform your policy. We could do it the other way, but it could help inform those things. But those considerations would need to be known, especially the OCP harmonization, I think, is one of the critical pieces.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, or does that respond?
Yes, I understand that there's a lot of intersections with this policy and that it's gotten wrapped up in OCP renewal. I'm just concerned about expectations on the part of new developments that we will take on sewer systems or water systems, and perhaps the more appropriate way to go about it would be to do what some other regional districts have done, which is to put a freeze on taking on any more water or sewer systems until a new policy can be developed. And of course, we're not going to do that here at this committee right now, but I'm watching the expenses pile up for the systems that we already have, the expenses and complexities. And other regional districts also are struggling with this same challenge. So does staff have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. The corporate officer and I are just conferring, and our memory believes there's a past motion very similar to this effect. So we can take that back and review and maybe follow up. Would that be appropriate? Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll just confirm that more work is being done, and it relates to other policies and the OCP projects. So the next one is Lane of Wreaths, and that is up to date. Any comments? And the next one is Advisory Planning Commission, and the status is staff are undertaking a review of the APC processes, hopefully soon, because it says Q2 2024, and can recommend policy updates following this review. No questions of clarification from the board, so I will move on. The next one is waiving fees and charges, and that is on page 38. And that is up to date. No comments. And the next one is proclamations. That is up to date. Okay, and then correspondence. I don't have that one. So correspondence recommended amendments are in providing and track changes, including the recommendation to remove the procedure from the policy. You've got that? Page 40. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I realize that this is a difficult one, but I had several questions. And wow, this is hard to figure out what number this is. oh, heavens. It says 4.7, 4.6. Maybe it's 4.6.1. Anyway, correspondence of complaint of an operational nature shall be dealt with by staff with a copy of both the letter of complaint and response in the director reading file. Do you have any idea how many complaints I get? This could be massive. I think we need to look at that again, that only complaints that are not resolved in a short period of time would need to be elevated to the director's reading file. Because in my experience, most complaints that I get are forwarded to staff and there is a response in a reasonably short period of time. And it's usually resolved, or at least it's well on the way to being resolved. So I don't think that I need to know about it. Yeah, I can only imagine how many complaints from Area E there are that I don't actually see, and I really don't want to know. So I have a couple of other, and in a similar vein, the top of page 41, correspondence referring to general bylaws or zoning will be copied to the area director. That could be another huge volume of, I'm not sure what staff are trying to get at there, but again, like anything that quotes a bylaw number would be in our reading file would be pretty scary. We're trying to winnow through this and only identify, important issues. And again, in 4.12, I think it is, it's correspondence providing feedback related to a specific area. Does that mean a specific electoral area? That needs to be clarified. I think this policy needs further work. I recognize the challenge involved, but and I do think that this should be reviewed by the whole board, not just this committee.
Staff, do you have a response to some of those questions and concerns?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so what would be helpful would be to refer the policy back to staff for revision. Did I hear the consideration was not limiting, I don't know if that's the word, but refining the routing mechanism to directors, and that we bring it forward to a committee of the whole for further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to move that. Thank you.
And we are clear that the recommended amendments are provided in the track changes. And the recommendation is to remove the procedures from the policy. So that does kind of cover some of it. But do we have a motion? We've got a motion. We have a seconder. I wouldn't mind hearing the motion as.
Thank you, Chair. That the correspondence policy be referred back to staff for revision in an effort to refine the routing mechanism to directors, and that this policy be brought to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, that covers the intent. We had a mover and a seconder. Director Bax. Corporate Director, do we have, you have another comment or are you finished?
Nope.
Okay, it's Director Bax.
Before this disappears into the hands of staff, I'd like to, I appreciate the thoroughness of Director McMahon's interpretation of this, very excellent. I'm worried that that although the volume of emails on a particular complaint may be large, I'm worried that if there's a delay between the complaint and it showing up in a director's file, that I'm going to miss out on some things. That perhaps staff could if there's a bunch of complaints about the same issue, that we only receive a single piece of complaint. So that I'm brought, that the issue is brought up to the director at the soonest possible instance. I'm just worried that if it doesn't get dealt with quickly, that we're going to come to the party a little late. That's my concern.
Thank you, Director Bax. It has been pointed out to me that on page 41, I'm not going to try and quote the numbers, 4.10.1, if multiple duplicate items are received, comments may be summarized in a staff report for appropriate agenda. Director McMahon, further comments?
Yeah, I had one more. There's, where did I go? It was about invitations. There we go, point 4.something13. Invitations of a formal nature related to board business shall be placed on the board agenda if required. How would we know if it's required? That's sort of puzzling to me. I'm thinking of, every year we get an invitation to lay wreaths for Remembrance Day. And I don't think that needs to be on a board agenda because it's routine. So I think that, the chair or somebody, if we received an invitation to meet with King Charles, we might want to put that on a board agenda, but I think if that happened, that the chair of the committee, the board chair would flag that as something worthy of recognition. And maybe discussion, yeah. So that's, it might be worth circulating this draft policy now to directors for some more feedback before the next revision comes forward, just so that we catch a few of these little things. Thanks.
So we have a motion on the floor. It didn't include this, so I would like to pass it on to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that there is a correspondence review process that happens with the chair and the CAO, and at that point, that's what's determined what should go onto a board agenda as part of a formal invitation. So that's, yeah.
Go ahead,
So-
Dr. McMahon.
So what would
Director
trump
McMahon.
I hate using that word. Sorry, don't use that word. Which is more important, the policy or the board chair's decision at agenda review? Like, can the board chair say, the heck with the policy, we're sticking this on there, and make it a judgment call? Because I'm not sure that the policy is needed in that particular case, but whatever.
Do you have any further recommendations, or is that just a comment? Okay. Christine, go ahead. Nope. No, okay. Go ahead.
Did you want a response? Was that a question? I wasn't sure if that was a question or not.
Well, it was sort of a question, sure. Can the board chair overrule our policy at agenda review?
Yes, indeed, he can do that.
Okay, so we still have a motion. Is everybody clear on what the motion is? Do you want to hear it again, or would you ready to vote? So hearing. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, I'm wondering if you want to specify a date by which you want this brought to what committee of the whole meeting, by what time?
Well, I would certainly say this year. I wouldn't say Q3 because I can see September filling up quite drastically. So perhaps by the end of 2024 would be a suitable timeline.
So the motion has been seconded, but can we consider that a friendly amendment? I'm not sure we do them here, but I'm not seeing any objections, so I think that's reasonable. Are we ready to take a vote? All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. So our next one is feasibility study funding. And that is on page 42. And that is on, status is on hold for repeal. No updates at this time. Is there any comments? I'm not seeing any. If we're ready, we can move on. The next one is room naming, and that is where I saw the section for how we name around requests for First Nation naming. Any questions? That one, the recommendation, the status is staff recommend combining parks naming and rec facility room naming, which is what we discussed earlier, and propose it to be added to service plan in 2025. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. Let's move on. Support service allocation. That's up to date. No comments, so we'll keep moving on. Financial stability, that is on page, sustainability, that is on page 50. And that is up to date. Do you have a question? Okay, Director McMahon.
Where does this intersect with an intended review of our fees and charges for parks and recreation?
Staff?
Quick clarification on what specifically is being asked?
There was some suggestion at various times that we should aim for a percentage of recovery, cost recovery, in some of our services. And that I had the suspicion that that might be a consideration in the review, particularly for community halls and recreation facilities, of what we charge. That this policy does not specify anything about that, so I'm just curious as to whether that's contemplated.
Staff?
Where that would be contemplated would be in reviewing our fees and charges. If it's a substantive review, we'd likely come back for some sort of framing conversation with the board. There are certain bylaws that have not been reviewed for a number of years, hence my inquiry related to the specific one identified, because that one is quite substantive. So things to the nature of fee recovery, those are policy-related statements and considerations. We don't make carte blanche statements in these high-arching policies just because it may or may not be feasible depending on the service you're speaking to. So we don't like to be prescriptive in these larger form policies. But if you are identifying specific fee bylaws changes, you would do that. We are now incorporating, if I may, Chair, just elaborate a little bit, that we are going to be bringing and incorporating the fees and charges review as part of the budget process. That was one process improvement we identified as part of the budget process. So we anticipate to bring some here forward. We're going to slowly get through them because some are larger than others. So obviously what takes precedent out of the board's strategic plan is the water rates review aiming to the volumetric billing. So that one definitely is taking priority and we'll work through as capacity allows.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I will move on. We've got the water extraction for the purpose of commercial bottled water export. That policy is up to date. I'm not seeing any questions or comments on that one. The next one is screening officer bylaw notice, and that's also up to date. No questions. The next one is bylaw enforcement complaints. And we're good on that one. Then on page 62, parks acquisition from subdivision. No questions. And then we have new trails and bikeways procurement. Now that one is the status is referred to staff for further review and major revision. The further board direction is being sought as to what amendments may be required. Okay, so it looks like we'll just leave that as moving along. Are we ready to give any board direction? It doesn't look like I have any further direction from the board at this time. Would you like this to come back to a later committee meeting? Do you need a special motion for that, or are we just assuming? That's what I thought. Okay. So the next one is new trails and bikeways procurement and administration by SCRD function. That one is referred to staff for further review and major revision and board direction. So we'll let that go through its process if there's no other immediate comments or questions from the board. Going down my list here. Debt management is on page 64, and that is an up-to-date policy. No comments. Then we have pesticide use and invasive species, page 66. Staff proposed this be added to the service plans for 2025. Any comments? Nope. Oh, yes, Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. And just a suggestion for the revision, if appropriate, to include how we deal with invasive species in our parks and other, because I only see how pesticides are used on invasive species, but not necessarily how we deal with invasive species in general, like removal and disposal. I'm not sure if that would be out of scope for that. I hear a
Can I get staff to comment on whether that's covered somewhere else or where we see that?
I know it was considered somewhere else to have an actual invasive species policy. When we realized what it undertook, we I think just left this policy as is, but because it's a significant undertaking, it crosses multi-jurisdictions. So it's a large undertaking. We can consider that, but
Director McMahon, do you have any comments?
I realize it is a large undertaking, but it might be an idea as part of the review to ask staff for some low-hanging fruit, as it were, perhaps identifying a small number of invasive species of particular concern. But I realize that it's a long list, and we have, not we alone, is a significant problem on a number of our properties. And if we go down the list and get to Scotch broom, then we've got another, challenge. But I would like to see the Parks Department have a policy about dealing with invasive species on SCRD properties.
Do you have a suitably vague motion for recommendation?
Not at the moment. I hadn't considered this, but it is a concern, and it's a concern that residents raise with me on a regular basis. So at least if park staff had some policy direction about the fact that it's important, and then ways of prioritizing, because we obviously can't do everything. So, yeah, but I would prefer it if Parks came back to us with some suggested direction, perhaps based on what other jurisdictions are doing.
Corporate officer?
I'll also note that staff have proposed that the update to this policy be added to their 2025 service plan. So would that be included in the recommendation?
Director McMahon, do you have a?
I think we can leave this as it is for the moment, but I look forward to a exciting discussion sometime in future.
Thank you.
So we'll just leave that one as is, but I think there's at least be notes taken as the potential direction. The next one, and corporate officer, do you have a further comment? So the next one is asset management policy. That is on page 68, and that is up to date. Seeing no comments. The next one is free ticket program. The status is staff recommend implementing free transit for students to understand the implications of this program. Staff propose a review of this policy in Q3 2025. Yeah. Comments? No. Okay, we'll move on. Community amenity contribution for independent power and resource projects. That policy is up to date. Seeing no comments from the board. Then we're moving on to page 76, which is board administration directors and alternate directors. That policy is up to date. Then it's procurement on page 77. Amended policy adopted April 25th, 2024. Electoral areas granting aid. That policy is up to date. Any questions? Okay, the next one is federal gas tax, community works fund. The status of staff recommend waiting for new federal agreement to be announced before recommending amendments. Nope. Okay. Nope. Oh, Director Bax.
I believe the agreement is in place as of this week. And so I was wondering if there's anything that staff would like to let us know about that. It's been, I read that it's been extended for another 10 years.
Is this part of the policy review or is this a separate question?
I'm looking forward to staff's review of this policy and to see, I've discussed several different projects with staff that I'm hoping can align with this money that we can use to help our community members in various ways. I'm really looking for a path forward to, it's not actually burning a hole in my pocket, but it kind of is.
So that was more of a comment. Does staff have anything to add to that? Okay. Director McMahon.
Yeah, my question was, I assume that staff is going to be reviewing the gas tax agreement preparatory to our budget process. Do staff foresee the likelihood that we would need to amend the policy based on changes to the gas tax agreement? And if so, when would we be doing that? Thank you.
Staff?
It will be presented to the committee. They actually have to approve it, so it's not just automatically renewed. So that's the first step. You have to approve the agreement with UBCM. We're going to be providing that within this month to outline. There's not been significant changes, so I'm not sure it will actually impact your policy. I think that's part of the next steps. Part of the considerations of your policy are holistic type of discussion pieces, which is whether or not we want to use the funds for just SERD infrastructure, or if you want to be able to use it for public amenities that aren't owned or operated by the SERD. So those are fundamental concepts that I think the policy, that was the intent of reviewing the policy. And at that time, the board felt that we would use it for funding SCRD infrastructure just because we have such infrastructure deficit gaps. So still for review, and that could be an outcome of the renewal of the agreement.
With no further comments from the board, I'd like to move on. And federal gas tax, community works. Oh, no, we've done that one. Director's remuneration review. That is on page 94. That is up to date. Not seeing any comments from the board. Next one is financial planning. That is up to date. Okay, we'll move on. Director email management. That is on page 103. Do we have a question? Director McMahon?
I note that the policy references the email address board@scrd.ca, and I think that our practice around that address has changed. So I'm just, and there's also a reference to the ticket system. I'm just wondering if it's a little too specific, and if the policy should be made a little more general so that it doesn't become out of date every time we change email addresses.
Do you have a recommendation?
Perhaps we could refer this to staff for minor amendments.
Do you need a specific motion to that effect?
Chair, I think we understand the issue.
Thank you. Next on the list is Code of Conduct. That is on page 105, and that is up to date. I'm not seeing any questions or comments on that. And then the next one is investment. Oh, okay, so now we're heading into the misclassified policies. Does anybody need a break? Are we okay? Everybody seems fine. So again, we're just going over these. It's pending review. I'm not sure what other directions we need with these ones, but let's just go through them. So the investment policy, that is on page 108. And it's sort of it's in process to move it over to a policy. Is that correct? Can I just get staff to remind us what the difference is on this last group? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to point you to page 5 of the package. So as part of the inaugural Board Policy Review Committee, the committee went through and classified each policy. So because these have never come forward for review, like to just go through and see at a first glance, what does the committee want staff to do with each of these policies, whether it's to be repealed because it's not needed anymore. Housekeeping would be minor amendments, grammatical type of amendments. We can leave it as is, and then we would update it onto the new policy template. Major overhaul would be major revisions, going to take some time. Or should this in fact be an operational policy, in which case we would repeal it as a board policy and implement it as an operational?
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, let's start with the investment policy. We did have some comments about this one, so we'll start with Director McMahon. What is your recommendation?
Well, first off, the policy spends a lot of time saying what it doesn't cover, which left me wondering what it did cover. Because under the investment objectives in Section 5, I think the intent of the board at the time was to add E, socially responsible investment. But by the time you get through A, B, C, and D, do you ever get to E, I guess, was the question that I had for staff.
Staff, is there a question you can respond to there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would recommend that this policy come back for review. I would also consider, based on what's going on in local governments in BC, that this be a board policy. There's substantive changes related to investment and just things related to policy decisions in consideration for, say, social or environmental considerations. Back then, we used this particular term to incorporate those types of considerations. We are also, the Municipal Finance Authority has also engaged and has to report based on the UN frameworks for sustainability. And so those are some things that larger local governments most certainly are considering. But in our case, because we're small and that would be quite an undertaking, we just sort of rely on local MFAs reporting. So this, I think, needs to reflect an update based on sort of the changing times and what's happening in the marketplace. I think it wouldn't be a substantive revision, but it most certainly shouldn't be operational. It should be a board-led policy. So that would be my recommendation, that it come back for future revision. I can't promise we'll do it this year, but most certainly something that should come back for the next policy review.
So before we look at a motion to that effect, so board members, you're on alert to get a motion together. I will go to Director Bax.
Yeah, if we look at what's going on in the world today, we realize that there is a demand amongst people to invest our money in a way that doesn't bring harm. And I think that's extremely important as far as our ethical investing. And if I imagine there's a list on page 113 that involves where we can invest, but I don't trust that all these entities are ethically investing. And so I think it's really important for us to keep an eye on how we invest our money. I've recently heard a story on the CBC about the Ontario Teachers Retirement Fund and how if they had ethically invested 10 years ago, they'd actually have more money today. And so I think it's not a sacrifice for us to invest in a future that's safer and kinder for our citizens. And I think it's a really important part of who we are as a government.
So Director Bax, do you have a recommendation?
I recommend that we send it to staff to review and bring it back to us.
We have a motion that's seconded. Any other comments to the motion?
Through the chair, thank you. I would question whether the recommendation needs to speak to the classification remaining as a board policy.
I'm not clear on that, so I'm going to refer to staff for clarification.
I don't think that needs to be affirmed. It already is a board policy by nature of it being adopted by the board. If you so choose to revert any of these to operational, then that would be something we would want in a recommendation.
Okay. So we'll leave that one vague for now. And we've got a mover, seconder. I don't see anyone needing to speak further to that, so I'm just going to hold the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. The next one is the tangible capital asset policy. I don't see any, Director McMahon?
Yes, it seems to me that this is a policy of its time, because if I remember correctly, this was around the time that the province required local governments to start managing our tangible capital assets. But I guess my question is, does this need to be a standalone policy, or would this topic not be covered under financial sustainability?
Staff?
So in doing our research in preparation for this particular meeting, it was staff's opinion that it should be a board policy and should be significantly revised for future consideration. I think the policy as it stands, what is being managed operationally, but I think as we get into our capital planning and process and the board's involved in setting those policy levels, that those types of things. So it would be quite a significant revision that we intend on bringing hopefully by the end of the year, because this is very helpful to process for, say, budgeting and board decisions. So would suggest board policy and that it come back for a revision.
Can I get a motion to that effect? Director McMahon?
Yeah, I would. I'm happy to move that this be referred to staff for a major overhaul, but I am questioning whether it does need to be a standalone or whether it could be included in financial sustainability, because maintaining our assets is part of the sustainability of the services we offer.
So we have a motion and potentially that note that is noted for consideration, if that's adequate. So we have a seconder. Are we clear on the motion, board? It's pretty straightforward. Okay, I'm seeing no other questions. I'd like to call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4 policies are all around fire service level policies for different communities. Do these need to be reviewed separately, or can the direction on these 4 be considered the same direction? Director Bax? Yeah, corporate. Yes, she does. See.
Sorry, I thought that was a question for me. I would suggest that it is up to the committee how you want to approach these. What I can offer is I did speak to the GM Planning and Community Development. And so these policies would probably need to be referred back to staff for an update. For example, the playbook has been superseded by new legislation. So while they are in effect and we are following them, they could use a review and some update.
So what I'm hearing from staff is this could be a housekeeping review. And I'm just wondering if we can look at all 4 of them together. And I'll refer this to Director Bax.
Yeah, I can give a quick summary on how they differ from each other. They are all basically identical, except for the fact that Half Moon Bay and Roberts Creek are identical to each other. Gibson's has an extra service that they offer, which is hazmat, and Egmont has a lower service level, and they do interior only. Besides that, there is some discussion around other policies to do with the fire departments in our that we care for, and I was wondering if that is going to affect. I believe there's an action table going on to deal with the fire department's compensations, and I was wondering how that would be incorporated into these policies. Question for staff.
Staff, do you have a response, or would you be looking for some other staff? So we don't have that response available with us right now, but that certainly can be noted. And then I'm just wondering if we look at as far as a recommended action for staff for these four. Do you have a recommended action? Suggestion seems to be housekeeping, but it's the will of the board how they'd like to see this move forward. Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like to move that these 4 policies be referred to staff for housekeeping amendments.
Do I have a seconder? Yes, I do. You have another question, Director Bax?
Yeah, by housekeeping, you mean to review whether or not, what the legislation is that has to deal with that's replacing the playbook, which is only about 6 or 7 years old now. But it still doesn't, at some point in the future, I imagine staff will come forward with the results of our firefighter compensation action team, and that will be something that we will incorporate into these policies? Would that be something that that will happen in the future?
So I'll just get staff to make a comment. I recognize that maybe the correct expertise is not around the table right this second, but if they could provide some kind of action through staff on that question.
Thank you, Chair. I think we see firefighter compensation as a completely separate issue from the policies in front of the committee, and we would deal with that separately.
Okay, I see no further questions on the motion. We have a seconder. All those in favor? And that passes. And then finally, we have the telecommunications facility review procedure. Any questions or comments? Corporate officer, would you like to comment on this one?
None. Thank you, Chair. So this policy is actually owned by a director or manager, general manager, corporate services. But what I will note about it is it's very heavy on procedure. There could be some element of it that should be considered for board policy, but likely we would want this referred back to staff so we could assess it.
Okay, so we have that suggestion from staff. I'd like to go to Director McMahon, and then we can come back to that.
I'm going to observe, based on, the last few years where we've had several telecommunications projects referred to the SCRD, there is a robust public engagement process required by telecommunications companies before they can go forward with projects. And I think I think it was well-intentioned, but I think it's an overreach, and I don't think it's necessary that we do not need to have policy on this. I suspect that nobody I suspect this policy fell into disuse. But when facilities are proposed on the coast, they do get referred to us. So the board does get to deal with them. So unless staff can think of some reason that we really need this policy, I would think that we could repeal it. Thank you.
Can I get a response from staff, potentially?
There was quite a bit of back and forth between our planning and development because there's some intersects with our 911 services, some planning considerations, and not just our IT services. So I'm not seeing there is concurrence amongst everyone. So I think it's probably prudent to bring it back to ensure everyone's aligned and ensure we don't have any gaps.
Thanks for that suggestion. I'd go to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'd suggest a recommendation maybe that we hold for repeal pending a review from staff about other processes that may cover off this policy.
So we have a motion, it was seconded, and we'll hold that and go to Director Bax.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment behind this, but I still think it's because of our dependence on these communication towers within our emergency response system. I think it's really important that we do retain a policy like this within the board purview.
Okay, are we clear on the motion? Would you like it read back? I think everyone seems fairly clear. Are you clear? We have a seconder. Director Bax, is that a residual? Okay. If there's no further questions, I'd like to call a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's one opposed, and that passes. Thank you. So that is all our items for our annual policy review committee. And thank you very much for participating. I have a final comment or question from Director Bax.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. We have that seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. So we have members of the public in the gallery. This is an opportunity for them to ask questions. So if I could have them advance to the ability to have questions. I don't see any hands. Okay, I think we're good. So thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned.